In fact, Saturday, they are breaking ground for a new facility up in Mitrovica. And my wife and I have known the dean for several years now. And we've had a great chance to watch her. She's been working to get this academy started for K-12 students. And it's a STEM school, and if you're not sure what that is, it's science, technology, engineering, math. I got it right. I always say medicine, and then my wife gives me a look. So anyway, she yeah, it's STEAM, there's art in the middle there, so anyway, I always miss something. But long story short is we've had a great chance to watch Nadine work at this, and the thing about Nadine is you watch her long enough, you see a lot of effort, you see a lot of just passion for it, but also research. One of the things I really respect about her is she does her homework, she doesn't make anything half-baked. And so she's done a lot of traveling, particularly in the States, looking at schools that do innovative ways to teaching these sort of things. And I remember she visited this place in Columbus, Ohio, and I still remember it because we had dinner with her shortly thereafter, and she was just talking about how great it was, how the classroom layout was different and everything else. So I was in Mitrovica last month, and Nadine and I started talking, and she mentioned that the guys from the ICC, International Center for Creativity, would, I got that right too, right? Oh, yeah, there we go. Getting the plugs good so far. I'll forget my own name, but other than that. Anyway, the guys from ICC would be here. And she just mentioned, you know, it'd be great if we could maybe take advantage of them being here. And Nadine is also very familiar with A.U.K. Her daughter and son-in-law both came here, and so she's always respected what they've done. And so as we talked about it a little more, we kind of hit on the idea of a forum, and I said, well, I'll go pitch it to our Vice President for Academic Affairs, Daniel Cosentino. And so I came to Dan, and he said, as it turns out, he has a big interest in innovation and creativity. And he said, I've actually spoken on that several times. Count me in. It's like, wow, okay. So there we go. That's why we're here. All right. Tonight, I'm going to go in reverse order of how we're going to present in terms of introductions. I'm joined by Jim Stevenson. He's going to go last. And he's from the ICC in Columbus, Ohio. And he'll tell you a little more about what they do. Again, very innovative approaches to particularly working with students who are interested in design and really a different way of doing education, particularly for students who are juniors and seniors in college. So I'll let him explain that more. Of course, Mr. Cosentino has been here at A.U.K. for 5 years, and again, he's our Vice President for Academic Affairs, and as I mentioned, he has spoken on this. So he's going to talk about this topic in light of his experience, particularly working at RIT and A.U.K. Now, I'm Erik Benson. I'm actually here for just the semester. I'm here on sabbatical from my university back in the U.S. I've had a chance to teach history here for the semester, a couple of history courses, and I'm enjoying it quite a bit. It's been a great experience. Now, you should be frightened right away because when somebody says they teach history, anytime a topic comes up, they want to talk about its history. So I'm going to take a few minutes and do that. And you're like, oh, why did you ruin something as forward-thinking as creativity and innovation by talking about the past? But as a historian, I usually say people who ignore the past, focus on the future, are going to screw something up really good. So more or less, I just want to set the table for these two guys. I'll start with a story, actually. Years ago, I was a very young faculty member, much younger than I am now, still gray hair, at a place in Arkansas, USA, a small university. And we had a meeting one day, and I remember a number of humanities faculty were rather up in arms. You know, the people who teach English and history were quite upset because they had just found out there was a plan to put a new building on campus right next to these apartments, and it was going to cause construction and logistical nightmares. And the building was a new business building. And then it always gets interesting when humanities people start talking about business. And I remember one of my colleagues who was known as rather excitable got up and just said, I think we ought to tell them to forget it. They shouldn't do it. He was saying in a slightly stronger language of that, but they should not do this. And I just don't understand, what place does business have at a university? Since when has business been part of a university education? And of course, I'm a smart alecky kind of guy, but I bit my tongue this time. I'm thinking, it's been part of a university education for over a century. Where have you been? I didn't say that out loud, but it was kind of interesting because as I thought about this topic and reflecting on that, The reason I tell you the story is this. A lot of times that is sort of the attitude of some people who don't appreciate change in education. And in this case, this was a guy who did not like the idea of business being in university because somehow that's not what a real university education is. And of course his view was, this is a sign of a change that should not happen. Of course, what's interesting, his perspective is education is unchanging. We do things the way we've always done it. What's interesting is, of course, a lot of other people on the other side today talk about the need to change education. We got to revolutionize it. And a lot of times, if you listen to them, their perspective is education never changes. People do education the way they've always done. So it's ironic because the people on both sides of this issue tend to argue from the perspective that education does not change. Some say it should, others say it shouldn't, but they sort of agree on that. And as a historian, I got to tell you, that's just not right. Education has always changed. The way we do things now are not the way it was done 100 years ago. The way it was done 100 years ago was not the way it was done 500 years ago. At one time, at medieval universities in Europe, professors got paid at the end of a lecture. If the students decided it was worth their time, they paid you. Now, I would say a lot of us would say we're glad that was changed, that there was some innovation in how they pay us, especially after certain classes. We wouldn't pay ourselves for that. To bring it a little closer in terms of the historical example, if you went to a college or university 150 years ago, everybody would have studied the same thing. If you went to Harvard, everybody would have taken a class in literature, history, philosophy, etc. The idea was, well, once you get a Harvard degree, you go out, if you're going to get a job in a business, as long as you can read, you're articulate, you can write, you can do math, you'll figure the job out. Which works until you hit the Industrial Revolution. Companies grow in size. Suddenly jobs become very specialized. You don't just need to know math, you need to know accounting, which is much more involved. And so universities innovate. They develop something called majors. These were not around before that. So universities said we still need that foundational knowledge, literature, math, the ability to write, etc., communicate. But once you get that foundation, then you move into a specialty, accounting, management, design, whatever. So that becomes the new norm. So universities have always innovated. That's not new. Today, of course, we talk somewhat about curriculum, but a lot of the idea of innovation is about how it's, and I hate this term, but delivered. In a world where we often function online, we live online, in a world where many jobs expect you to be able to maneuver around the internet, social media, etc., it's becoming more and more the case where universities have to adapt. And so how we do our curriculum, how we integrate online resources is becoming increasingly the norm. And so even today, and you hear a lot of people who don't like it, and again, this shouldn't change, but it does, and understandably so. Now that said, of course, the historian, and a couple of my students are in here, they know a lot of times I'll say, you have progress. Progress has an upside, but it also can have a downside. Thank you. My students took the cue. I love it. Anyway, there's an upside, downside. One of the things we have to be careful about with innovation and change in education is sometimes you have to avoid some of the possible pitfalls. One of the dangers we've had with majors is an increasing focus on vocation. The idea that college is simply here to train you for a job. Two problems with that. A university education shouldn't prepare you for just a job, it should prepare you to live, it should prepare you to be a good citizen, to vote in an informed manner, to be an informed consumer. In essence, if you're paying a lot of money for job training, that's probably not a good argument. The second thing is, people with a liberal arts foundation often do better in jobs and careers than those who have a purely vocational focus. Study after study shows people with that foundation will often earn more over the course of a career, and they will be more flexible and adapt to new careers as they come along. If you think about it, a lot of the careers you guys are planning on today didn't exist 20 years ago. Most of our design careers today, nobody was with the computers, etc., didn't exist. And so the question is, are you adaptable as new opportunities come along? And that's where an underlying liberal arts foundation helps. So the second thing too, and even as we look at delivery modes today, just point this out, there are some studies now showing the limitations of online education. Online, if you're doing purely online courses, psychological studies, they're even doing brain scans where they're showing that an online course often struggles to engage students in deeper level thinking, critical thinking, and even in areas of such things as empathy, understanding the perspective of the other. Now, that doesn't mean you can't do it, it just means you have to know what the limits are. And so a couple of takeaways here as we get started, and I'm going to kick this over. One is the fact changes always happen. People who believe education should not change or has not changed actually miss the history. It is always innovative. We have to be ready to innovate change. That said, we have to study changes carefully. We have to think about innovations carefully because sometimes innovations can be good, sometimes they can have negative effects. And so you don't want to innovate for the sake of innovation. And so this is why we need to have forums and conversations like this, where we have people who can share their experiences and talk about how they're doing innovative, creative things, where they can talk about things that work and things that don't, because that allows us to make good choices as we go forward with education. So with that, that's a little blurb. I just will punt to the people who actually have done the work. So, Dan, how about it?
Thank you, Eric. Hello, everyone. Daniel Cosentino. So I'm going to lead with slides, and I may have to lean back here.
Do you want me to man that for you?
We'll see if I can move this forward. Now that you gave me the idea, we're going to move to the model of paid per lecture. You just have to work on the math of that.
My
I probably have to be back there.
I don't know.
I'm the Vice President of Academic Affairs here, but I'm also an artist. So I started with my alma mater being RIT, the Rochester Institute of Technology. And I've been in education for about 7 years, so 3 years before I came here, and was successful at it, mostly teaching art before I got into design, before I got into some communication. And the model of education we have at RIT, at A.U.K. through RIT, is this school of individualized study. And I can't tell you how many times that I have to describe what that is, either to an individual who grew up inside this system in the Balkans, or to students even who are going through that system. It's not exactly going through a major. That is a model of education. It's taking a lot of different fields, or some of those, and developing your own trajectory, having enough options within the educational model to choose where you're going next. So this is kind of what we're doing here at RIT, or at A.U.K. And just to give you an idea of the kind of things that I do outside of my work, it's creative work, and I'm thinking about things visually and looking for different ways to piece the world in front of me together for a creative future, to find something new where there wasn't something before. So there we are in Rochester, New York. To prepare me for this, during my studies, I had lived, just to give you an idea of where I get my thinking from, I lived in an abandoned building because I was an artist and I needed a space to make art, and I couldn't afford both a house or an apartment and a place to make art. So I found the other side of the tracks, and all towns, all cities have them. They have them in Pristina too. And inside that building, which was very lonely and cold, I lived without hot water for a few years, as an example. I found some other artists, some young startup businesses, and I also found these people who were different kinds of professionals working on community design projects. And what I liked about the space was, I went in there and I said, I'm an artist and I do some kind of design. They said, well, you're welcome in here. We're architects and urban planners, and we're out there working in the community. I said, great, I'm working with the Rochester Institute of Technology as a graduate student in imaging arts. Your skills could be helpful to us. We also work with students from the University of Rochester, which is the larger employer there. With honor students from that space. So come in and tell us what you're thinking about inside the classroom, and we'll tell you what's happening out there in the communities. And we're going to try to bridge our services with the people that are out there. And I thought, this is the way education, this is the way I think. I like this place. I want to be here because I want to use in practice what I'm doing in the classroom immediately. And who do I want that to benefit before I go into a career is my community. So it had all the pieces involved. In the classroom at A.U.K, we try to push that model. So the idea is, okay, you're in the classroom now, you're taking a management course, but it does not live in isolation. It's not a silo. The management skills that you're using in your course could be useful to you in your media course. Why? Because a lot of the media and design really has to do with how you manage your time and manage your resources. So that can apply to both how you manage human resources, also how it applies to how you're creating a single project. So I found inside that space, indeed, these scholars came. There's a few people in here, if I pointed out, it's important, but the president of the University of Rochester would come, same with RIT, all in this little tiny space in an abandoned building. And we would take those skills outside, sometimes with other students, across classrooms, across disciplines, and I would bring some of the ideas of what we were working on back to the classroom and find support with my faculty in developing something from there. So those things did everything that the education model said it should. You should be creative enough to be able to use what you're doing in the classroom now. We look for a cooperative education model where students are testing their knowledge as they're going through the classroom, and encouraging students to be actively engaged with their communities. So they're doing service, they're becoming good citizens, and all of that comes back to the classroom. Sometimes that got turned into action, and I have to say, in the fight for beautifying some of these spaces in America that really got ugly after cities turned into suburbs, to see them come back to life was satisfying. So I came here with that thought. I'm an artist, I have a classroom of students, we're in Kosovo, there's a different model of education, and how do we do the two things that we say we do best? And that is teach communication skills and creative, individual creative responses to whatever's putting in front of them. So I got involved in the classroom and outside of the classroom with projects like this. And this comes from a Kosovo ministry-generated digital diplomacy effort. And if you hadn't heard about it before, there was an effort to create more accurate information about Kosovo on Wikipedia. So twice and 3 times now, Wikipedians came in to do these events, and our students participated. What did they need to participate? Inside our classroom, or inside a design classroom, they needed to learn how to interact with wikis and understand what they are, and compare that model against some research methods they might have been learning in another course. And what they did was end up being English language trainers for other persons around Kosovo who were participating, because there were some high school students and some other students from that weren't just from the U.K. And they used their skills and put it into action. So it's very likely, if you do a search for a topic in Kosovo, that the information you're seeing was updated as a result of these wiki academies. And whether we like it or not, students, and we also do the same, start our research often by searching Wikipedia and seeing what generally is there. In addition to this, I thought, well, if we have these different models in the classroom, and we have modules to work from within our classes, we don't necessarily need to be artists to participate in art. So I'm very much not a STEM model person, but a STEAM model person. art is the creative space where you don't need to have answers, even when you start. You can explore from where you are. So one of the things we did when we first went is went to Belgrade to the October Salon. It's in the Yugoslav times and still now. It's a contemporary art exhibition that happens biannually, and it's very prestigious in the region. So we ended up there with 12 students from A.U.K, from the classroom, participating with Serbian artists, looking specifically at, and this one's for you, Erik, looking specifically at textbooks that are currently in use in post-Yugoslav countries. We took a look at specific topics and did translations. So these are textbooks that are currently in use in Macedonia, in Serbia, in Kosovo, in Montenegro, in Albania, in the region. And we took a look at those topics, and in English discussed, among others, what we were doing there. And there's our group in Yang. And of course, coming here, it's okay, we don't do things in Belgrade, but we went to Belgrade and we had a good time, and there were 0 incidents. And a lot of the students from that experience are still working on something they picked up from that experience. And I remember traveling and thinking, this changed my life at some point. And that included personal stories, to tell me personal stories of what they experienced, in this case, during the war. Those got turned into booklets, and then literally, as we were doing this, it was an exhibition piece. So it's also the concept that the work you're looking at, in this case it had to do with English skills, translation, communication, history, art, management, as we do this, and in the same sense you realize that we are also a part of an exhibition piece. We're living artwork. And as this developed inside the space, it gave us a process or idea to move forward from, and that's how it would look like at the end. That year, the piece we participated in won the prize at the October Salon, so we were all participants in doing this. At the same time, in the classroom, I started thinking about ways that other faculty can join or triangulate their classrooms. So what am I doing in the classroom? I'm teaching design. What is Dr. Washak doing in the classroom? He's teaching environmental policy. So we decided to take a look at the data that they were working on, or the information they were working on, and see if we can come up with an innovative product. Because that's what they would ask to do in the business world, and that's where we would go from. So we started doing that. And looking at some of the issues inside the school itself that we want the students to understand. You may or may not know, or you may or may not have heard, but plagiarism is pretty rampant in this part of the world. So we had a bit of an embarrassment recently where transformative leadership scholarships were applied for, and there was some large percentage that had plagiarism. 58 or 61 of them or something had plagiarism as part of their package. This was people applying for graduate schools. And so we pushed the model of why it's important not to be academically honest and bring it into a visual sense. At the same time, some other things we're working on in the classroom took economics statistics and the club that was working with economics and turned it into visual infographics that are big now with design, especially with phones. So a student is saying, well, what can I do with media? Well, what can you do with your economics courses? And then within the course of a class, because of where we are innovatively with our technology, we're able to piece those together even before you leave the classroom. This one has become, this was designed by a student, Gator. This one has become an interesting one. It's circulated all over our RIT just to take a look at what's happening in employment in Kosovo. Some other things we were working on, the energy sector, there are opportunities for students here to work on it, and some research or undergraduate research that was going on across some courses. And those were also turned into infographics to show how people are heating their homes in Kosovo. And these are based on statistics, on verifiable statistics. At the same time, there are honor students, and we want these honor students to work with their faculty members to create something innovative or new now within the landscape of Christina. So one student decided to take a look at the bus schedule and recreate a map and develop a system while researching different transportation systems in different equal-sized cities around the world. And she came up with this and used some of the assignments in class to be able to create it, crossing boundaries. And then we thought, well, if we're doing this in the classroom here, let's see how we can bridge campuses. And what do our students need? Mobility. We want our students to be able to travel. We want Kosovo to be able to travel, to be able to participate regionally. And we have some campuses through our school. And we decided, well, how can we pay for something to be able to get some resources to pay some students? So we looked into different grants and found a provost grant. And then me and Dr. Washak, for the first time ever, we received actually the largest provost grant and the only one that was ever given outside of the Rochester campus, all to benefit students in different ways. And the interesting failures about these, I'm going to go through these quickly because I'm not a big fan of slides with bullet points. So we'll go through it. We had planned to do a lot in connecting these campuses. And in some ways, we succeeded in generating the idea that there are ways we can bridge our campuses with existing courses. We don't have to create a new model. We don't have to create a new school. We have an individualized study program. We have the knowledge there. We can just find a faculty member that's willing to participate and bridge our classes with wikis. But as Erik had noted, the failure in that is it's sometimes harder than expected to be able to get somebody's interest or deeper level thinking or knowledge without being present in the classroom. So there's something about a physical presence. There's something about the way I throw my voice. There's something about the way students interact that's necessary to create a synergy that allows failure and repeat of failure until a success emerges. So across campus is difficult. What worked better was 4 days in Belgrade. And there we were again together. So now we're looking at a different model of moving forward. What we did do, though, is create an annotated bibliography in a course, in an environmental policy course. Probably the most comprehensive one on forestry. We took some design concepts and had students compete to do some layout and web design solutions. And then provided opportunities, solutions to a client. In this case, the client was across different campuses. I'm not going to show this video now because of time, but videos were also created as part of that solution to be able to communicate that. Using the statistics and the data that was collected in the environmental policy courses. We use the wiki to communicate, and that has led to various different projects within the classroom, some of which students are directly involved in creating. I want to move to this last slide. Including, we now have a Center for Energy and Natural Resources. It employs students right out of school because they've been working on some of the projects and products that we're using there. A first multilingual site that was hosted on the RIT servers, all created by students at A.U.K. And using new technologies, in this case, this is a content management system called Drupal, which students, once they get into using, can turn into a business or a skill that they can get employed with. And they have. So with that model in mind, all without violating any rule with the existing curriculum. We're building in models. We're still meeting the learning outcomes of the course. Those of you in education will know what that means. We can still build rubrics to assess whether that's successful or not. and we can come back to our classroom all without changing the fundamental model, which takes a lot of time and effort and tends to turn things into bureaucratic work, as opposed to here, creative work that gives students the hands-on at the same time, the space to think about the work they're doing. And finally, we turn that into a community design Christina initiative, and we're still working on that. And the idea was, now that we can do this in the classroom with energy and media, we can also do this for Christina and think about what it means to be a good citizen of a place. Can you volunteer in your community? Can we tackle some of the problems more on a local level, as opposed to waiting for the government or ministry to do it, as we have done in various parts of Europe and various parts of the States, and share the pain of doing that and how difficult it is. And we'll see what happens. So we actually did mini charrette as a part of that process. And I don't know where it goes from there. What I do know is if we continue to bring pieces of it to the classroom, it will generate enough interest, as it had with some of the other work, to get more excitement and more innovation into the existing structure of A.U.K. And now we have math faculty at this point doing innovative models in the classroom, thinking about partnering with other classes. We have our media center working actively as a support center, so we're partners in education. Our technologists, our librarian, our faculty, our students, and some staff who might be interested, all thinking about a partnership model. How do I fit into that model? And working with the student clubs, we can find successful places and build maybe a competition model into it and look for what happens next. So I think with that, if you're not asleep, I'll turn this over to my colleague.
That'd be great. Yeah. Good evening. It's an honor to be here. I bring you greetings from slightly west of Rochester, New York. We're about 8,000 kilometers from here, and Columbus, Ohio, in the States, and we've been in Kosovo since Sunday, and we've eaten extremely well. Your food is phenomenal, and your people are even better. We've had a wonderful trip, and people have been so friendly and welcoming, and we've really enjoyed ourselves. Dan, you said so many things that I'm gonna like ask for your presentation or some notes, because there was a concept in there that inspired us, and we went very parallel paths. Our congratulations on putting two speakers together that really do belong together, because sometimes you end up and the person's in the opposition party. You're like, ooh, this might not go well. But we're cut from a similar cloth, and there was a concept in there of appropriate innovation, and he talked about being able to work inside of a model that already exists, because no matter how innovative education thinks they might be, they still move at geological time compared to entrepreneurs and industry. So you have to work with a model that works, and that makes administrators feel good, and that makes people that accreditate feel good. So you still have to work in a box. And we have a saying around the studio that the greater the restriction, the greater the creativity. It's very easy to work with no borders, right? But it's very challenging to work with lots of borders. So which would be more fun? Creating next year's Ferrari, or creating an affordable sports sedan that's actually interesting? Well, it'd be more fun to do the Ferrari, but it's far more challenging to do an interesting sports sedan that's affordable and interesting. The greater the restriction, the greater the creativity. So that was a lot of the inspiration when we created the ICC. So, yes, please. This very brief deck is to simply introduce who we are and talk a little bit of why we're here and some things we believe in, some things we stand for, and things that inspire us, the things that you get out of bed excited to do. Sometimes you don't, and you would rather fill your days with things you are excited about and creativity and innovation is one for us. I just hope today the goal would be to give you just some background on who we are and talk about our personnel briefly. We have a large team, at least I hope we still do. All of our founding partners are here. Tom Balliot, who's our Chief Financial Officer and an industrial designer. One of our founders, Jim Orr, who's a lead instructor. Jim was also the head of design at General Motors for 20 years of his career and designed an awful lot of cars. He's going to have to tell you all of them because I've already forgotten most. And we're also a working studio, so we wanted to share some of our professional clients with you so you would know how we do a professional and education partnership. It's very blurry. We like to have professionals involved in all aspects of education. And education can also impact professionals. So also our education profile, talk a little bit about our major and our degree program, and then share some new ventures. And I think, Eric, if I'm not mistaken, there's a little time at the end for, we hope to field some questions and feedback and get your thoughts as well. So if we could go to the next one. So very quickly, we exist to inspire creative confidence and to educate tomorrow's creativity and design thought leaders with integrity and the best design problem-solving tools. Really, our students, we want them to, they'll graduate with lots of knowledge. They'll graduate with facts, they'll even graduate with some skills, but to us, our mission is relevancy. Relevancy matters. And for us, we want to make sure that we're training tomorrow's design thought leaders to be relevant, highly relevant. So next slide, please. Thank you. So we have two primary offerings the International Center for Creativity delivers. And the first one is professional design consultation. We do both product, system, space generation improvement. Thank you. He's multi-talented. Yeah. So we do, the professional design consultation is actually with educational institutions who are looking to reshape their curriculum to interject more design thinking, more creative problem-solving skills. We've worked with public administrators, we've worked with engineering staff, we've worked with a variety of people that just want to know how to consistently generate better ideas, how to document ideas better. And we also teach industrial design inside of our studios, which I'll give you a quick campus tour here in a bit so you can see the environment. So on the education side, we do, again, consultation, design, and delivery. We do continuing education and workshops for professionals. That's a bridge gap for us to be able to stay in contact with people that are on the cutting edge of design work. And then we also deliver a Bachelor of Arts in Industrial and Innovative Design. And this takes multiple forms. Our particular brand, if you will, treats all three-dimensional objects the same. Sometimes architectural space design is pulled out. Sometimes transportation is pulled out and separated. Sometimes consumer product is separated. For us, it's all the same thing. These are just three-dimensional objects. They fall under the same the guidelines of physics and taste, which is really where we live. And so we treat them all as three-dimensional objects. So just to give you a quick example of what we're talking about, I have a couple of slides on the next page or two of what that is, if you could go ahead and advance it. So these are sketches for us. These are digital sketches of interior space concepting. This is actually a student center at a university. And it gives you an idea of why it's important for a designer, long before you get to the architect, for a designer to be able to impact how a human is going to interact with the space. Not just where the beams are going to go, or where the sprinklers need to go, or what the structural engineers are concerned with, but how are humans going to interact with the space? Next slide, please. In the same building on the exterior, the same way. Is it welcoming? Did it use the topography well? Did you know where to go? Did you know where the door was? Did it feel good when you walked in? You've been in spaces before where you knew someone thought it through. A great compliment to any designer or engineer is, wow, they thought of everything, right? The feeling to the consumer is, wow, they anticipated what I needed before I knew I needed it. It's that feeling when you go into your favorite hotel when you travel, or your favorite coffee shop, and everything is just so. Somebody thought about it and anticipated your needs, and that's a lot of what we do on the space design side. Next slide, please. We also do product design, and this is a portable power washer system that they can be really boring and ugly, but they sit on a shelf next to ones that look cool. So which one are they going to buy? They're going to buy the one that looks cool. So we sometimes just impact the aesthetic, but very often we're working with the design engineer to impact the mechanical engineering on how it operates, and the function to also create consumer delight for how it works, that it works as well as it looks. Next slide, please. We also do transportation design, which for us, transportation design is just simply personal mobility. What does that look like? It can take the shape of a lot of things. We love cars. We work on cars. We design automobiles, specifically automobile interiors. We work with a company called Honda, and they sell in the North American brands. It's called Acura. It's their luxury brand, and we work with them in depth with both students and on the professional side. But transportation takes a lot of different shapes. It still goes back to the user. How is the user going to interact with it? How are they going to be delighted with the product? Next slide, please. And also, this is a track-specific racing car. How is it going to be used? Who is the person that's going to want to write a check, and how are they going to use this? As again, a track-specific car that catered to a certain audience, a very niche, very narrow product. But again, we were able to crawl inside of the head of anticipating what they need. Next slide, please. Something else that industrial designers do is called pre-visualization. The movie industry hires a lot of industrial designers because even though the writers, in this case it's Star Wars, even though George Lucas wrote Star Wars, he never figured out what Darth Vader looked like or what an X-Wing looked like. That was up to an industrial designer who did the pre-visualization. He had to imagine what that was. And you can see this is art in a form of being able to use the classic fine art skills, and they don't go away. They're pervasive because they touch people. One thing that, computer design is a great production environment, but the one thing it lacks is a soul. Right? You have to put a soul into it, and that's handcrafted skills before you get into the digital production environment. And you can see that this is official art that was shared as part of a teaser campaign for the new series that's coming up. But again, it was done by a team of industrial designers. So it gives you a little feel of slightly different from a two-dimensional designer into what a three-dimensional designer does. Next slide. So why are we in Kosovo? That's a good question. I'm starting to think I came here for the macchiatos and the tomatoes because they're the best I've ever had. So that was worth the plane ticket by themselves. But we're here, as Dan mentioned earlier and as Erik mentioned earlier, what Nadine's doing in the Kosovo Leadership Academy inspired us to want to come and see what was going on and the growth that was happening and the desire for innovation and education. So we're here to work with her to find new ways of helping the growth of her academy. We're also here to explore teaching and student exchange programs. I think it's a rich experience when you get to visit other cultures. It just teaches you more about yourself, and it teaches you how to relate to people in a different way and understand their way of thinking and their culture, how they grew up, what's important to them, what they believe in, what they don't believe in. All of those things matter when you're a designer, so we're looking for those international experiences. And lastly, we're exploring and learning new ways to invest and grow. And we're very proud. It's been a wonderful thing to come and be welcomed and see the American flag so many places. It obviously is warm in our hearts, but it's wonderful to come here and feel a brotherhood, if you will, and see firsthand what's going on here, and feel so good about what's going on here. This is an exciting place to be as an emerging democracy. It's exciting, but those are the reasons that we're here. Next slide, please. So very quickly, this is our team. At least I hope that's the rest of our team. All three of us are here. The rest of these people are supposed to be running the company right now. They are our instructors, our in-house designers, and also a staff of consultants. So you don't know any of those people, so we're just going to skip through this. Next slide, please. This is a quick snapshot of our client base. We have a diverse group of brands that we service, and we service them strategically. We also do hands-on delivery for many of these clients. And many of them are global brands, so they've educated us as well on their interests in various parts of the world and what matters to the brands in various parts of the world. And it's a wonderful group of people that, again, we've gotten an education from, and we've delivered design services in various forms. Next slide, please. So a very quick highlight of our degree program. We've partnered with a private university, it's named Cedarville University, and Cedarville has about 3,400 students, and they did not have an industrial design program, but we had an industrial design program in the university, and it was an opportunity for us to get together. They were looking at architecture, and they found out how expensive architecture was to implement, and they said, wow, maybe we don't want that, but we really are getting a lot of requests from students for three-dimensional design, and the graphic design program was flourishing because those designers were getting great jobs in industry and doing great things. So, long story long, we partnered with them, and what we do is we teach the last 2 years of a 4-year bachelor's program. So they go to main campus for their freshman and their sophomore year for year 1 and year 2, and get a lot of their gen eds and their prerequisites. I'm not sure what I should be calling them here, but they're required courses, if you will. And then their last 2 years for the content specific, for their major specific, they come to our campus in Columbus, which is about an hour from main campus, and they study industrial design in our studios. So right now there's 93 students spread over the 4 years, from freshman through senior. And these 93 students are the current active ones. It doesn't include declared majors or graduates. So there's far more from the program than that. At the moment, we have a 100% graduation rate, and it's a little bit of a skewed number. We're relatively small. So we've been very fortunate that once people get in and make the commitment to move to our campus, they want to stick it out and stay with it. But we're very proud of our placement rate. Currently, and universities use this number in strange ways. They'll say, well, 98% of our graduates are placed. What they mean is, of students that returned the survey are working somewhere or are in graduate school. That's not our number. Our number is working in design. They have a design career, and that number is somewhere north of 95%. So, our next slide, please. So very quickly, what makes the program different is that it's an experiential learning environment, which means simply that you learn by doing, that you get your hands on a project as you're learning the principles. Because if you're a musician, the old joke is that one performance is worth 10 rehearsals, right? You get on stage to perform, and you're forcing yourself to be very attentive to the notes and the movements or whatever it may be. That, again, that performance is worth 10 rehearsals. It's the same way in design. When there's a clock ticking and a client looking, it's a very different feeling than, I have 15 weeks. I'll work my way through it. So the experiential learning environment means that all theoretical principles are attached to a hands-on project. And sometimes the projects are real industry-led projects where the design engineer from the brand is actually supervising and jurying. We're doing the academic metrics, we're keeping the rubric in line, and we're keeping the learning objectives in line to be able to grade them. But at the end, the client is going to give them the thumbs up or thumbs down and give them that professional feedback to help them move on with their career. It's also very practical in its application. We wanted skills. We wanted the computer-aided design, we wanted hand rendering skills, we wanted speaking skills, business model creation skills. We wanted it to be very practical and hands-on. It's also, again, I've spoken of the integration of the professionals. They also help us design the projects. So very often they'll come to us and say, would your students be interested in ... And then we have to think how academically we're going to, we'd say, yeah, cool project, but I'm not sure we could measure it. Or I'm not sure it'll fit into our track, but very often we can accommodate. It's also a modular program that's taught sequentially instead of concurrently. So now, very often in university, you might take 4 classes simultaneously, like notes on a staff, where you sign up for multiple courses and you work your way through. Ours are actually taught end to end, where you do 1 class at a time for 4 weeks. That's all you do. So the retention loss is much less because you're immersed in it every day for many, many hours a day, but it also suits the project environment very well. We're able to move very quickly through large amounts of material by being able to teach sequentially. And then we've integrated a concept called design thinking. Actually, Dan talked about it quite a bit intuitively, of being able to use the designer's creative problem-solving maps and processes and apply them to other business opportunities, other problems that might be solved. And then it's also 4 years versus 5. Most industrial design majors in the States take 5 years to complete. We thought that felt like a lot. I didn't want to be a student for 5 years. I wanted to be a student for less so I could start working. So we've crammed more into the existing model. Again, to reiterate the genius of working inside existing systems, we like to call it appropriate innovation. The appropriate innovation was that we didn't want to change something that didn't need change just for the sake of it. What we wanted to do is just cram more inside of what we already had to work with. And by making some of these changes, that's happened. But the 4 years versus 5 has given us a competitive advantage. Financially, each year at our school is expensive. But if you look at 4 years of our more expensive school versus 5+ years of some less expensive, over the long haul, we're actually less money. And they also know that there is a true track of getting out. I went to a large public institution in the United States, and we used to joke that the reason they let you graduate is because you figured out the bureaucracy. And they didn't want you telling anyone else. So they let you go because it was very difficult to get out in 4 years. They made it complicated. It was like a rat maze. Every time you needed a class, it wasn't available. So we didn't want that to happen and create a true 4-year track. Next slide, please. Very quickly, our enrollment has been excellent. We're getting close to our capacity numbers, which we would really like between 25 and 30 per section for each year, freshman, sophomore, junior, senior. Next slide, please. Some of our students have gone on very recently to do some exciting things. And we have a student working at Reebok. He is designing CrossFit shoes for both Adidas and Reebok. They're the same company, even though they compete with each other. He goes back and forth between the studios. He did an internship at Reebok, and now he's at Adidas, and they're trying to recruit him back over to Reebok. It's an interesting environment. It's very competitive. It's located in Boston, Massachusetts. Sam and Brendan are both working at Honda Research and Development. Both of them got to work on the upcoming Acura NSX, their new supercar. We also had Elena Goodale completed the Mercedes-Benz Global Design apprenticeship. It's actually located in Carlsbad, California, but she got to spend some time in Germany at the mothership working on Mercedes design as well. And then also General Dynamics, Bose Electronics, we have a student that's working on Bluetooth speaker devices. And next slide, please. A few other names that you might recognize. Again, General Dynamics, and we placed another student just this past year at Honda R&D. It's lovely when they start working there and they can start pulling their friends along with them, which happens frequently. Next slide, please. These folks did student-client projects with us. I don't need to labor that. Next slide. I want to make sure we leave time for questions. The Industrial Designers Society of America is the largest trade association associated with our craft. So we've created, Columbus has the largest student chapter anywhere in the country because we have 3 large industrial design programs in one town. The Ohio State University has an industrial design program. The Columbus College of Art and Design has a program, and then of course our program. So we were able to, the three of us come together and collaborate and compete and have fun with each other, with the students. So it's now the largest set of student chapters in the country. Next slide, please. So our facility, real quickly, it's 13,000 square feet, and I already forgot the conversion. Do you remember, Nadine, what it was? To square meters? No, it wasn't. Well, we'll get back to that. But it's 13,000 square foot campus. We have 1,200 square meters. Yeah, just for scale for you. The 3D modeling and printing we do in-house. We do prototyping and build models in-house. We have what are called Cintiq glass tablets, which are sketch tablets that you can draw digitally, you can sketch digitally, you can paint digitally. We don't let them touch that until they've mastered the fine arts skill, but then that improves their digital renderings enormously. And then we also do professional workshop series. Next slide, please. So very quickly, I want to give you a campus tour and just show you a little bit of what the buildings look like. You can have the next slide, please. So to let you know, our weather is similar. This was taken in the first day of classes in January, and it was, I believe, about negative 15 Fahrenheit. It was a little brisk that day. But this is the front of our facility. It's a historical barn that's located on the northwest side of Columbus. Even though we're close to the city center, we're about we're less than 20 minutes from the city center. It still feels like we're in the woods, but we can still get a good cup of coffee. So, next slide, please. So this is what the studio looks like in the fall. Pretty much what it looks like right now during the fall time. Next slide. And you can see it's like a park-like setting. The students really enjoy the campus, but it's also very inspiring. A lot of design campuses are very, very modern, and a lot of concrete and glass that provides a nice neutral background to the design. We like organic design, and that's really what our inspiration is the environment, and being able to look to nature for kind of biomimicry and being able to replicate what's going on outside our window. Next slide, please. This is our second building. This is our senior studio. They occupy the first floor, and we have some classroom space on the second floor. Next slide, please. This is the interior shot. These are some of our students making a mess at lunch, I believe. But we tried to make a modern barn. So there used to be cows in here, and now there's not cows anymore. We hope not. And but this is their kind of lounge area, and it's also the lobby for our design firm. Next slide. Upstairs is our design studio. They're highly configurable. We're able to set up and tear down on a regular basis, which is actually part of how we teach, is that we disrupt routine. That's part of what innovation is about, is to, it's a safe environment to continue to disrupt, because they know they're having class, they know they'll be working with the same students, they know they're working on the curriculum, but by making small disruptions, it causes them to not be automated and have to rethink their view. They have a different view out the window, they have a different view of the room, maybe they're sitting next to somebody they like better. So it happens regularly. Next slide, please. This is the opposite end of that same building with a student giving one of their senior presentations. A lot of what happens in the curriculum is presenting. They're in front of their peers, I'd say almost every day, especially during their third year. They're up and talking about their work every single day, because you have to be persuasive about your craft. Next slide, please. It's a very collaborative environment. These two were placed on a team, and these design cycles are very quick. They're 2.5, 3 weeks, 3.5, 4 weeks. They move by very quickly, so they understand what true pace of work is. Next slide. This is one of our most industrious students. This is Joe Deptowitz, and that's what he always looks like. He's always head down, working very hard. But I just wanted to include the picture so you can see the rest of the studio as well. Next slide. This is one of our professionals. This is Doug Ritterling, who's the head of global design for a cleaning company. They make Hoover, Auric, Dirt Devil, several other brands, but he came to be part of our design process. Next slide, please. And this is a team from an architectural space design firm that came to recruit our students, so they came and made that presentation. And the young man in the lower left, looking at the back of his head, he now works there. He got hired by this firm and is designing Starbucks interiors in the States. their latest prototype of stores. He's doing the kind of experiential marketing that's happening inside of the new Starbucks prototypes. Next slide, please. This is student senior project. Next slide. We'll just blast through those. We have a full digital rendering lab. We work in SolidWorks a lot. I don't know if any engineers, you might use, I think you call it CATIA, we call it CATIA. It's a 3D rendering software that it's cousin to SolidWorks, and they work very, very well together in creating objects that you can move around and look through. Next slide. We have 3D printing capability in-house, so we can do prototypes, and this is just like sketching. You can have an idea, go print it out, put it in your hand, see if it feels good, no, throw it away. It was only 25 cents of material, it's not a big deal. We can print another one, so the machine's running all day long. Next slide, please. It's a student transportation project. Next slide. This is a SolidWorks model of, believe it or not, a over 100 mile an hour actual speed RC car, you know, a remote control car. Next slide, please. We have a full model shop as well. Austin and Jacob working on them. These are sketches to us. These are three-dimensional sketches done with foam, where again, we're able to rapid prototype and see how it feels, see how it looks, get the general shape of something, see if it fits the brand. And there's no better way to do that than to make one and see what it looks like. Next slide. And then lastly, we also do a lot of events around celebrating design. And since our university is an hour away from us, we can't really rely on them to bring community together. We do that ourselves. So, and we're all car guys. We all came from the car industry, and we're very passionate about cars. So recently, we had a car show at the facility. And next slide, please. We had some wonderful cars come out to visit us. And this also gives you a good look at our studios and our workshops. And hopefully we have some Ferrari fans in the room. But this F1 car is an actual, this car competed in the Formula One World Championship in 1989 with Nigel Mansell driving the factory car. But it was part of our display and a couple of other, next slide please. This gives you a look down the rest of our studio into our garage space. And again, it was a wonderful opportunity for us to celebrate automotive design and bring that community together and get to enjoy some great cars. Next slide. And this is the front of our facility with a couple of British classics sitting out front. But again, we got to do a design walk around and enjoy the three-dimensional art that these cars were. Next slide, please. So very quickly, we're obviously desiring to work with the Kosovo Leadership Academy as they continue to grow into their new facilities and helping them perhaps even design some of their labs and their rooms. We're working with two other universities in the U.S. Otterbein University, which is a small school close to us that's developing their own Futuring and Innovation Center. And we're also working with the College of William and Mary on a prerequisite design thinking program, which may take multiple forms. We're not sure which direction they want to take it. Ironically, our contact is in Vienna right now on a Fulbright scholarship. We almost stopped to say hello to him on our way through, but we didn't want to go through customs again. So we decided to just keep going because we flew in through Vienna. And of course, we're looking for the study and teach abroad. And really, I think that's my last slide, Eric. Yes, so that's a very quick introduction. Thank you for letting me go through it quickly, but I wanted to give you a snapshot of some things that we're trying that are new and that we're experimenting with and that we're learning every day. And it's a real honor to be here and to get to see firsthand what's going on here at the university and to get to meet you. So, Eric, I think this is your show, so I'm going to give it back to you.
Take a few questions, and so yeah, go for it. I've seen it where sometimes you turn around in the front row, and that's a little awkward. So, anyways, questions, comments, cries of shock. Welcome. Yes.
Yeah. I actually have a question for Jamie, especially related to the role of technology in what you're doing, and also if you could tell a bit also about the integration of information and communication technologies in the work that you do. And the reason why I'm asking that is because here in Kosovo, you know, it's a bit, we're having some challenges with the usage of technology and with the integration of technology in the in the curriculum and also in the classroom. And it's not like, I mean, in the US where you have computers everywhere, screens everywhere, data everywhere. So how do you see the role of technology in all of that, in what you have done and what you are doing there? What's the role of technology in the industrial design and also our role in the education process? And how, what would be your advice into how to integrate better the ICTs, be that in the design or in general in the classroom? And also I had another question, if you could share a bit how the students use 3D printing in your classroom, and which courses use the 3D printing, and how do you sensitize the students and the people to make usage of the 3D printing? Thanks.
Okay, great. Well, everybody's going to have to help me remember all the questions, because they're all really good. First off, you had asked about our integration of technology. We treat it as just another tool. It isn't the most important tool. Where it excels is in production and sharing, right? But it's not at the genesis of the idea. So we focus a lot on the integrity of the design first, not necessarily how it's going to be produced or how it'll be communicated. We can just take a picture of a hand drawing and text it to you, and we still got to communicate an idea. We're more concerned with, did we solve the customer's problem? Are we directionally going the right place? Is it good design long before we put it into a digital environment to make it very refined? So we're not anti-technology by any stretch of the imagination, but we're in a case where there's too much. If I could tell a story, JD, with your permission, when we visited Chrysler, we were visiting Daimler Chrysler when it was Daimler Chrysler. It's now obviously Fiat Chrysler, right? And we were taken out into the design studios when we told them we wanted to emphasize hand rendering and fine art skills first before computer rendering. And he told us, here's why you need to do this. We went out into the shop, into the design floor, and he asked the designer, hey, could you show our guests some quick designs? He said, well, no, we have to go back to our computers. He said, well, JD, could you show us some designs? And he whipped out a piece of paper and he just started sketch rendering, one after the other, 5, 6, 7, 8. He goes, that's enough, class is dismissed. Because an idea, you know, it should not be dependent on its tool. Computers give us so much freedom, but you're also limited to your ability to manage the software. We always say if you don't know how to manipulate the pixels will manipulate you. And pretty soon your knowledge of InDesign or Illustrator or Photoshop or SolidWorks will limit your ability to think and be imaginative. So it always starts with a pencil for us. With that said, the technology is the best thing that's happened from a production and sharing environment, where we can share ideas all over the world instantaneously, but we're certainly not dependent. I would actually like to hear your feedback on some of the same things.
I think it's exactly the same, especially now. If it was 10 years ago and it was the first order of Photoshop, I did imaging, so photography. I know people that spent weeks of their life making a mask so they could make an illusion in a photograph. And that very mask could be made in less than a second now with the tool that the software created. And I think back to those hours of pain that they went through. And the way I think of it is, it's like black spot, like that's a black spot in your life. And now, you know, and now when we start a class, it's the same thing. It's the tool. I don't even want to hear the word Photoshop because I don't want to talk in those terms. That's not what we're making. working on an idea. So the tool is gonna work for you, or you're not gonna work for the tool. And we have also training videos, even in education, you know, there's these Lynda tutorials and things that'll do it faster and better than you can get at any classroom. So, and it's, you know, you could find it for relatively cheap. So train yourself on the tool, but really don't put that even first, second, third tier, just leave it way back there as a thought, because the tool is gonna change, and you'll need a different tool. And the experience part of it is better. I like the idea of sketching. It could also be sculpture. It could also be performance. I like performance in some sense, right?
Yep.
So you build some other kind of structure, and that leads to something new. Like maybe the best painting faculty member would be actually a performer for a while. And the best performance faculty would be someone who paints, because you take a new idea, and if you're thinking creatively, you're gonna find another angle to speak to students and develop. So it's the same model. Everything you said makes sense to me.
And I think to your point, the way you create adoption is by making sure it's in the appropriate environment, right? Because it gets in the way if it's in the inappropriate step. If it's too early to work in a production environment, you're answering the wrong questions too soon, and it limits your creativity. Creativity is really about coming up with possibilities before you start making choices. And most of school has taught us to figure out what the right answer is and to make a choice, where creativity is to create options and possibilities and then turn the corner. And now, okay, we have other questions inside the question.
3D.
Oh, 3D printing, yeah. Did we cover the other piece for you?
Yeah, how do you actually, how do you make students use 3D printing? And how did you integrate it into the curriculum?
Okay.
Which courses are using the 3D printers?
Sure. So the 3D printer it's a tool, again, and it's a little, does anybody have enough mileage in here to remember a beta cassette? Which was, it was awful, wasn't it? Right, so it was a long time ago. I think a lot of 3D printers are a little like beta cassettes, that it doesn't pay to be an early adopter. They are changing so fast. As a matter of fact, Nadine, it was Monday, we were at the Innovation Center, Kosovo, here in town, and there's a incubator that these guys have designed, one of the best 3D printers I've ever seen. As a matter of fact, we were going to place an order that day, but they haven't built any yet. There's still an incubator. It's brilliant. But there's 100 people like that refining it. So it's very steep right now on how fast that's improving. With that said, we treat it appropriately in that it's not important. The quality of the design is important. Because, I don't know if you remember when you first had to print on color, and you had to start adjusting your tone, and you had to start adjusting contrast to get it to look like what you wanted it to look like. That's what 3D printing is like now. You have to change your settings to be able for it to print out the way that you wanted it to print out. So I think we're a little ways away from seeing the true power of the media. The way we use it in the studio is for sketching, rough ideas, for prototypes that don't require a lot of fine finish work, because sometimes they can come out pretty rough. So again, we emphasize it for the appropriate tool for the appropriate job. They're faster to go down into the shop and get a piece of foam insulation and carve it and paint it. And it's going to be better, more realistic, and it's interesting because now you put it on your shelf and say, I could create 10 of those variations by the time the printer is done printing one, because they're not exactly all that quick. They're very sophisticated glue guns is what they are, right? Now I love them for proof of concept, when you simply need to know, would that work, right? Should I develop one to see if it would work in a simple environment? But it's a skill unto itself. We use it in our 3D surfacing classes. We use it in prototyping classes. And we use it also, the best interface I've seen for it is called 3D123. And it's a freeware app from AutoCAD. Yes, yeah, and you can walk around an object taking photos of it and upload it into a 3D printer and print a rough model of it. So you can create an action figure of yourself if you'd like, you know.
It's free.
And it's free, right? So it's a wonderful piece of freeware that allows you to come up with some fun ideas and uses. But we also limit it, if they want to use it for personal projects, which every student does, they usually buy their own media and work on it on their own time. But again, they're in their infancy, they break a lot, and I think we've not even scratched the surface of the maturity level. I think it's where color printers were in 1992, right? Something like that.
We have frequent power outs here, so we've enjoyed, after 6 hours of a 12-hour print, yeah. It's an ugly moment.
It is an ugly moment.
Actually, just to clarify, because I think you were going somewhere with the question by quick story. There's a rather large university in western Michigan that just finished a brand new library, put in a 3D printer. Everybody thought it was the coolest thing in the world, and nobody's figured out how to use it yet. It sat there for months, nobody used it. It just sat there, and it's kind of interesting. So I say that to say that one of the, I think where part of the question was going there is, of course, here where you have less access to a lot of the technology, there could be a sense in which you feel behind, like how you compete. But I guess what you're saying is, in a lot of ways, considering 3D and that it's in its infancy, but even in general, your best, it's not about the technology. You can't be driven by the technology. It's skills that basically anybody could use, and so in a sense you're saying it's not, the competitive gap isn't as large as one
I agree.
person.
Yeah, no,
Would
that's
that be where you go with that?
a better answer than mine. Listen to him.
Hey, one squirrel finds not lost.
I
Yeah,
think there was another.
question, yes.
You mentioned, like, as you were presenting, like having very similar views as Daniel on the way you try to learn by applying knowledge and then from that experience learning. And on that matter, I have actually a question, which is, have you thought of having some kind of relationship with A.U.K in terms of internships or opening up some kind of concentration or something on that line of thinking?
If there's macchiatos and tomatoes involved, you know, part of why we're here is to learn about opportunities and to find out if folks see value in what we bring to the table as well. So I think a lot of that's yet to be determined. We would love to learn more about the country. We want to learn more about people, but mostly we want to learn more about dreams and where people want to be, and then how we can help if we can. And that may be by bringing people here, it may be by bringing people from here to there. We don't know yet. But that's the fun of the exploration, isn't it? Is just to make it a learning journey.
So you said that around 100% of the students who graduate at your faculty get employed into design companies. So I would like to know more about how does that happen.
Yeah.
I mean, do you have any plans, or do you invite companies in presentations or stuff like that?
That's a great question. We spend a lot of our time recruiting companies because our partnering university has a wonderful career services department, but they don't know anything about industrial design. So the onus is on us, the responsibility is on us, and a lot of our responsibility as owners and teachers is to make sure that industry knows we're there, because we're a young program. So we promote ourselves to industry by inviting them to forums, inviting them to presentations. We invite them to come and evaluate projects. We invite them to car shows. We invite them to coffee. Any way we can build relationships, because ultimately all business is the same. It's about relationships, it's about people, and it's about fulfilling their needs. And by getting them in the studio, they get a first look at our talent, early, you know, in the junior year maybe, and they can start saying, you know, I like the way that person thinks. And so it's by the time they get to be a senior, they've had 2 or 3 emails back and forth, they're connected on LinkedIn, they've had coffee, and all of a sudden that first interview isn't so awkward. So it's all about relationship building, and fortunately, because we're a professional design practice, we have contacts with corporations already. There'll come a time when that won't be enough, and we'll have to go to the next level of marketing to get deeper into companies. But so far, that's how we've done it, is through relationship building, and we see that as one of our primary roles. You know, I'm a supporting instructor, which means I teach 1/2 of one class, right? That's not my value to the organization. My value to the organization is building relationships. So that's how we do it. And we teach them how to search, and it's complicated. Web tools, at least in the States, web postings on job boards are just one component. But you have to pick up the phone. You have to drop your materials off. You have to be where they are. You have to connect with them online. The students that do the work get jobs. That last 5% is what bothers me. The ones that had the same opportunities and the same degree and didn't yet, because sometimes life gets in the way. Some of them may have got married, some of them may have said, look, I'd rather take a year off, study abroad, you know, do some other life experience. So not everybody wants to jump into career. But that's how, does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Well, and that would go, sorry, I'm throwing comments as we go, that goes to the issue of innovation, because you think about how many programs hired, even in the US 20 years ago, the web has changed so much, because now students can often go find their own. I still remember friends of mine, of course I was planning on graduate school, but I had friends of mine, for example, I had a friend of mine who was in accounting, so what'd you do? Well, you wait until the big 5 or 6 or whatever it was at the time, accounting firms showed up at such and such place. Everybody went into this, almost a cattle room, they called it, where everybody was in line, and you get your 5 minutes with somebody at this firm, and then this firm, this firm. Today, now, again, if you try to run that model, it doesn't work anymore. And so the fact that you guys have kind of told the university, we know your people aren't skilled at this, so we'll do this in-house, and how they're going about it is very different than what you'd see at most universities. Again, that's where innovation, that's good innovation right there. That's why education has to innovate it once in a while, because it's not just about what you're being taught in the classroom, it's also about then how do we connect you to use that education going forward. So
I'll add one more thing. The one thing that you mentioned in your talk is you partner with other competing institutions and have this sort of cooperative, competitive model.
Yeah.
And one thing that we're trying to do here, at least in thought, and that's to start, we've got all these startup institutions and not a lot of cooperation between them. There might be a symposium here and there with members coming in to see, but not necessarily student group competing against student group, having fun, but also competing in the marketplace.
That's right.
And those students who are doing well will possibly, you know, get the job over your students. But we have I think the model on education in the States to be able to absorb it and kind of like it. Like, okay, it's approved me. This is our sport. So let's go out there and have some sport, you know, and move it out of there. And when you said that, I thought, yeah, we're working hard now to say, look, A.U.K is an open place. Are you another institution working? Come and work with us. Our students want to work with your students. We're in the infancy of sort of building that model. So it's nice to see how you're going to begin partnering there.
We heard the expression that a high tide raises all ships,
Yeah.
right? So that if the city starts to develop a reputation for talent, it attracts more recruiters. And in the States, the joke is, you know, we have too much fast food, but in the States, they're all in the same corner,
Yep.
right? So if you're at the corner of 2 busy streets, there'll be fast food all around that corner, because they want to compete with each other by the person coming there and saying, which one are we going to choose? You got an opportunity to pluck a customer from a competitor, but you also are going to give away just as many. But the expression is that you have to collaborate to compete. I think. You can't be on an island in this world we live in anymore. I'm sorry, did I cut
We
somebody
got
off?
two, so.
I'm sorry.
No, that's fine.
In your discipline, I find like you're more focusing like more dynamic and mobility products as far as I figure it out. And I was wondering how do you communicate with nature? You mentioned like biomimicry,
Yes.
How do you find it like interdisciplinary courses like between the different disciplines? For example, how do you communicate with bioengineers, let's say? How do you engage them in your design process? How do they inform the design shape while in the brainstorming process? How much role do they play in this kind of stage when they actually do? And then working with different kind of bicycles and car designing process, how do you communicate as well with the urban designers? Do they integrate in the design process?
Yeah, that's a big question. So, how does biomimicry get integrated? We're very fortunate that one of the names I skipped over, Jay Kinsinger, he's an engineering professor with a speciality in biomimicry. It's really biomedical, but he's turned it to biomimicry. He's also an artist and an industrial designer. You very find that as you found, with Dan and others, that people that are in the creative space love to learn about lots of things, and whether it's art or music or architecture. As it turns out, Jay, this engineer I'm speaking of, he has his master's in biomedical engineering, but he builds bicycles. He actually builds wooden bicycles, right? So he started intentionally saying, how can I be an artist and an engineer and celebrate the environment, right? And it was a fascinating mashup of concepts. Now, specifically, when you ask how, we didn't invent this. There was this quasi-famous designer. His name was Leonardo da Vinci. That we rip him off every day because he was such a genius to look. If you want to learn how to fly, you look at the birds. If you want to learn how to run, you look at the cheetah. But being a really good, intentional observationalist, you spend lots of time observing. And nature's fascinating because the more you look at it, the less you know. And for us, the proximity matters, and by being in a natural environment, we get to be in a wonderful place that inspires that. But there are times when the leaves are off the trees and it's ugly and it's rainy and it's snowy, that you have to find the genius in that too, right? You have to find the beauty there as well. So it's integrated formally by the consulting professor that brings the discipline to the curriculum. We would like it to be more involved than it is. I'd like to tell you that it's involved 100% in what we do. It isn't. It's in about 20% of our courses. Will we be able to get into biomimicry? But even this past week, today, we were visiting the Mine Museum, and we were looking at those incredible geodes and the crystals, and we looked and said, well, maybe there's a new term that needs to be geomimicry, because there were obelisks and structures and these fascinating shapes, and we said, okay, it isn't just biomimicry, but it's nature mimicry in general. So I think we're students of it as well. We're learning as we go, and it's only about 20% involved. We'd like it to be far more than that. And we're also integrating more sustainable design principles. There isn't one aspect of what any of us talked about up there, whether it's buildings, or bikes, or cars, that aren't impacted by sustainable design. And it has to be an attitude and a lifestyle for a designer to be thinking about the whole system, not only from where materials are sourced, but what's going to happen to the artifact when you're done with it. And why can't we start designing in the beginning for what's going to happen when the consumer's done with it and wants to get rid of it? Can it already have a repurpose built into it for the next person?
I missed part of what you were saying before.
Oh, we noticed. We all talked about you when you came in.
sure you,
No, I'm just
everybody
kidding.
will. I'm sure they will later. I'm sure Dan will have something to say rather than.
But you'll have good photographs, Mike, so
I'll have a few.
you're forgiven.
So if you kind of covered this, I apologize, but I'm curious, you had mentioned that you start with pencil sketching and stuff, as the starting point, and, in my past life, I was in commercial advertising. I knew a guy who designed the Clemson Tiger Ball logo,
Mhm.
and sat down with him one day. We were doing some work with, for R.J. Reynolds, and we were talking about the type that needed to be on a piece of packaging that we were doing. And somebody named a font and showed him the perspective that it had to be, and he could just hand draw it.
Right.
Perfect, hand drawn, we could photograph it and we could use it as it was drawn.
Yeah.
That took, decades of training and practice to get that level of skill. Today you do the same thing by just stretching type in, in Illustrator or something. So to me, it seems like we've lost a lot of those old manual skills because of the technology. So the question that I have is, where do you guys who do this for a living draw the line between photoreal hand painting
Yeah.
and good enough for what you do? Because I don't know where the line is.
Right.
It's good enough for, we got a rough sketch.
Right.
And do we need like a photoreal artist to draw a thing, or do we need just basic lines and so where's that balance?
It's a really relevant question, probably far more than you even realize. That for us, rapid sketch rendering and rapid visualization is the ability more to train your eye than it is to train your hand. Because you have to design the product from the back. You have to design it seeing through the product, not just the surface of the product, because you have to put in mind functionality. But rapid sketch rendering is done in pencil, ballpoint pen, and actually, it's terrifying, but Jim, our lead instructor, is here, makes them sketch in permanent Sharpie marker. So it's called commitment, right? It is, yeah. And the students in their first year, they're standing there going, what? But pretty soon they start understanding that you can finesse it. You can, and create art with it. The line, I think, and we kind of call our program Revenge of the Pencil, because industry came back and said, I need people that can sit in a room and concept and draw quickly. And even at Pixar, where one of Jim's former students is a chief animator at Pixar, they storyboard everything by hand. Everything is done by hand, because once you load it into a CAD environment, it sits and chugs on it for hours, to be able to have an output. It's too inefficient. Sketching is still the fastest, most efficient way to communicate an idea. But what I will say is that the interface was the problem. We've been wanting to use digital sketch tools for years, but they're horrible. It's this big foam ball. It looks like this. You're drawing with this thing. You're like, yeah, that's effective. But now there's a stylus. There's many of them. There's styly, okay, that you can finesse. So you can start sketching digitally, and you can use the Wacom Cintiqs and other interfaces to actually get some good finesse and to make them start looking good. The problem really hasn't been sketching versus digital. Sketching's better, but digital can communicate better. The interface was the problem. The human-machine interface has been the issue. So now we're finally, I don't know how many years we've been looking for one, 12 years? Easily, to get to the point where we're comfortable integrating it sooner in the rendering process.
So Wacom tablets, you guys didn't like those?
No, the
I
problem
used
is
to use them for Photoshop in the 90s.
they've changed. They've changed, I promise. But the sensitivity has changed, the fine point has changed, so much of the layering has changed. But what we found now is the desire to have final art, what you're calling about photo, we used to call it photo ready, right? Final art, that doesn't really exist anymore. Unless you, as an artist or as the designer, want to have that as an artifact or a keepsake for the design process.
What I meant when I said photoreal was, if you look at it you would think it was a photograph.
Yeah, I understand.
Not like camera ready art. but
Yeah,
just- Cause I had this, you say you guys are from the car business. I worked with a guy named Herb Davidson who used to paint car art,
Yeah.
for Detroit. And
Yeah.
he would paint the car in whatever perspective, and then the backgrounds would be dropped in for whatever ads. And so the studio came out of a hand painting
Yeah.
studio, and it became a digital studio over time. And it was in that process of change where we went from taking flat type
Yep.
that was typeset on a, old typesetter, putting it up on a 4x5 camera or an 8x10 camera and
Right.
photographing it in perspective, and then using that for that was kind of the evolution that we
Yeah.
went through back then. And like I said, I got out of it because I got tired of, the analog thing was my thing,
Right.
and the digital became sloppy and easy and lazy and,
Well, the joke is that desktop publishing opened bad taste to the masses,
yeah.
right?
Plus, the newest line of these the newest line of tablets are now consumer stylus stuff. So
Yeah.
it used to be a specific industry, Wacom tablets, and now like even this new Microsoft thing, they're advertising this stylus pen as having
Yeah, you guys see
2048 different levels of
Yeah.
pressure sensitivity.
Yeah.
So it's, now
The new iPad.
it's about to change.
The new iPad,
Yeah.
the screen's pressure.
It's at the moment of being, cheap and functional enough.
There's an exciting time that happens though when you're able to sketch in front of a client, right? It's a very magical moment because they keep that.
Yeah.
And they ask you to sign it, and it goes on the wall, and now they own it because they were there at the genesis of the idea. No one ever does that with file draft 1 saved on whatever on a hard drive.
Yeah.
And the other problem is that you write over your own work. Very often you keep doing save, and you miss all of those iterations, and pretty soon you don't realize that you designed something really good back here, and now it's gone. But when you sketch it, you set it aside, you can come back and say, I like where that was going. I want to build back off of that again.
We use Save As in our classes.
Yeah, that's right. For that purpose. Yeah.
Dates,
For that very purpose. JD, did you want to interject something?
Just to back up what Jim is stating here, I think one of the things we found with the digital phenomenon, as marvelous as it is, and I want to say this with respect, so I'm walking on thin ice here, but it lacks a certain, for lack of a better term, soul or heart. Whereas in front of a client, when you sharpen a stick or you bring out a ballpoint pen, you just spit on the table, it matters. And when you do that, all of a sudden the gravitation comes right down with full force, what we're talking about here at the A.U.K. and at ICC. It's the difference between having a soul and a heartbeat as opposed to a cold, calculating, push a button, put it here, put it there, and it takes an entirely different perspective on how to handle that properly. We use the system to generate what we refer to as really quick empathic studies. Very emotional, very quick, very moody. But it doesn't have the same effect as having a soulful situation, sitting down and saying, here's things we did just like that, and all of a sudden it just compels you to move forward. So the magic is, and pardon me for rambling here, but the magic is, I don't think we're ever going to replace the human soul. No matter how strong and digital it gets, we can get much more sophisticated with it, but there's something about, in our case, our travels, so the client, Jim, we always laugh, we leave a meeting, it's not laugh at them, but we have this humorous approach. We'll sit back and say, we've done X number of sketches in 10 seconds, and again, it reveals one thing about us, that you can't hide the truth. They saw it firsthand. We do in 30 seconds what some corporations do in 6 or 7 weeks, and in some cases, they never call back. So we always leave those traces behind. We're the Robin Hoods of the nation, so interesting.
That's one thing we were talking about a little bit ago, coming back to education, for example. One of the things, actually I was at a conference in May, and they're actually doing psychological studies now about the importance of rapport.
Right.
And so this is that face-to-face moment and experience and personal contact. And there are actually studies showing now that, instructors who can establish rapport in a classroom are going to have a much more effective, the learning experience could be much more effective, which of course has implications if you're talking about online. There's that soul, that heart, that relationship, that connection. And now they're starting to quantify how that matters.
Our clients will start speaking about a subject matter, and Jim, Tom, and I will sit there and they'll start nodding their head, and all of a sudden, in 30 seconds, we turn the pad on. Is that it? They go, holy wow.
Yeah, that's, yeah.
Again, it's that interface in this business, it's so critical, because you get to know who they are, and then they get to know who we are. So it really establishes a great, again, observation.
Yeah, great, great point. Any other questions? We'll take, it's 8:45, I'll get one more if somebody had one, or if not,
I'm gonna just throw this out there because of the new technologies, the tablet technologies and stuff. Have you guys considered putting down your ballpoints and picking up one of these new tablets that you
Oh,
can
yeah.
sketch things?
We have dozens of
Oh,
them,
yeah.
and
Yeah.
they're sitting on the, it's gonna get better shelf. It's sitting with the beta cassette decks. It's constant, every time you buy it, it's outdated, right?
Right.
And we're just not technology nerds. We buy it all, we use it all because we want the students to have access to it. But they do the same thing. They're like, yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah.
And they go back and they open up the pencil
I
paper.
bought one of those tablets and I never opened my laptop for like 4 months, and I was talking about, I think this replaced the laptop, and I forget what happened, it was some functionality thing, and now I leave both of them. Like, I won't use either now. Now I don't want a laptop and I don't want the tablet, and I just say, where's the desktop, like,
That's
you go back and then you're stuck, you're like,
It's the right tool for the job.
right, that
right?
tool killed this other tool, and now both of them are dead.
tablet killed the lab.
I killed both of them.
Okay, I guess we'll end on a note of talking about innovation and education of how we don't use new technology, which just seems very
That
counterintuitive.
really is funny.
But on that note,
Human hand is
I do want to say, sorry, that's the historian in me that loves the irony in any situation. But again, I want to thank both of you. This actually was a great session. I want to thank all of you for attending, and just an round of applause for the two people.